join me for this reading. As always, if you have something you'd like me to read about any Wikipedia page, please put it in the comments down below. I read every comment. Recently I've had less time to respond, but I am going to go through and respond to every comment. So, leave me something and I will read it. Okay. Wicca. Afterlife. Belief in the afterlife varies among Wiccans and does not occupy a central place within the religion. As the historian Ronald Hutton remarked, the instinctual position of most Wiccans seems to be that if one makes the most of the present life in all respects, then the next life is more or less certainly going to benefit from the process, and so one may as well concentrate on the present. Although there are practitioners who do not believe in any form of afterlife, it is nevertheless a common belief among Wiccans that human beings have a spirit or soul that survives bodily death. So probably a dualistic kind of belief system then. Kind of Gnostic. Understandings of what this soul constitutes vary among differing traditions, with Fairy Wicca, for instance, having adopted a belief from Hawaiian religion that the human being has 3 souls. Never heard that one before. Interesting. Although not accepted by all Wiccans, a belief in reincarnation is the dominant afterlife belief within Wicca, having been originally espoused by a gardener. Understandings of how the cycle of reincarnation operates differ among practitioners. The prominent Wiccan Raymond Buckland, for instance, insisted that human souls would only incarnate into human bodies, whereas other Wiccans believe that a human soul can incarnate into any life form. There is also a common Wiccan belief that any witches will come to be reincarnated as future witches, an idea originally expressed by Gardner. Gardner also articulated the view that the human soul rested for a period between bodily death and its incarnation, with this resting place commonly being referred to as the Summerland among the Wiccan community. This allows many Wiccans to believe that mediums can contact the spirits of the deceased, a belief adopted from spiritualism. Now we move to their belief in magic, which I think for many of you will be the main fascination with Wicca. Many Wiccans believe in magic, a manipulative force exercised through the practice of witchcraft or sorcery. Many Wiccans agree with the definition of magic offered by ceremonial magicians, such as Aleister Crowley, who declared that magic was the science and art of causing change to occur in conformity with will. While another prominent ceremonial magician, MacGregor Mathers, stated that it was the science of the control of the secret forces of nature. Many Wiccans believe magic to be a law of nature, as yet misunderstood or disregarded by contemporary science, and as such they do not view it as being supernatural, but a part of what Leo Martello calls superpowers that reside in the natural. Some Wiccans believe that magic is simply making full use of the 5 senses to achieve surprising results, whilst other Wiccans do not claim to know how magic works, merely believing that it does because they have observed it to be so. Some spell it magic with a CK, a variation coined by the influential occultist Aleister Crowley, associated with Crowley's religion of Thelema rather than Wicca. During ritual practices, which are often staged in a sacred circle, Wiccans cast spells or workings intended to bring about real change in the physical world. Common Wiccan spells include those used for healing, for protection, fertility, or to banish negative influences. Many early Wiccans, such as Alexander's Sybil Leek and Alex Winfield, referred to their own magic as white magic, which contrasted with black magic, which they associated with evil and Satanism. Sanders also used the similar terminology of the left-hand path to describe magic performed with good intentions, terminology that had originated with the occultist Helena Blavatsky in the 19th century. Some modern Wiccans, however, have stopped using the white-black magic and left-right-hand path dichotomies, arguing, for instance, that the colour black should not necessarily have any associations with evil. Scholars of religion Rodney Stark and William Bainbridge claimed in 1985 that Wicca had reacted to secularization by a headlong plunge back into magic, and that it was a reactionary religion which would soon die out. This view was heavily criticized in 1999 by the historian Ronald Hutton, who claimed that the evidence displayed the very opposite, that a large number of Wiccans were in jobs at the cutting edge of scientific culture, such as computer technology. Now, we move to witchcraft, and there's an interesting quote embedded here on the page by a religious studies scholar, Joanne Pearson, and I'll just read it for you. Identification as a witch can provide a link to those persecuted and executed in the Great Witch Hunt, which can then be remembered as a Holocaust against women, a repackaging of history that implies conscious victimization and the appropriation of Holocaust as a badge of honor, gendercide rather than genocide, an elective identification with the image of the witch during the time of the persecutions is commonly regarded as part of the reclamation of female power, a myth that is used by modern feminist witches as an aid in their struggle for freedom from patriarchal oppression. That is very interesting of a point. I hadn't thought about it like that before. Of course, you have the classic idea of how, using the excuse of calling someone a witch, led them to, do horrible things in the Great Witch Hunt era. But at the same time, it's not like there were, Wiccans in the modern sense of the religion who were being persecuted. And so I find it interesting that you can't necessarily, I don't think anyone has the right to personally self-identify as a part of that persecuted group, but you can, I think females of course do have the right to talk about female persecution in general in history and bring that up as a cause. But I don't think it's like comparing yourself and being a modern day Jew and then looking at survivors of the Holocaust and saying that, you're part of the descendants from that group, unless you have some really deep family history where you have a great period of history where your family particularly was hunted for being a witch, but I don't think that's really the case. The nature of the Great Witch Hunt, style era is not really genocidal, like if you compare it to the Holocaust. It's kind of like a thing that would happen in society where people would call someone So I do find that a very interesting remark by that religious studies scholar. Interesting. Okay, now let's continue. The historian Walter Hagenegaf noted that the Wiccan view of witchcraft was an outgrowth of romantic semi-scholarship. He noted that Gardner, like previous writers, viewed the witch as a positive antitype which derives much of its symbolic force from its implicit criticism of dominant Judeo-Christian and Enlightenment values. Hanegraaff noted that Wiccans dismissed various elements traditionally associated with witchcraft, namely infanticide, cannibalism, Satanism, and sexual orgies, by claiming that these were either misunderstandings or fictions invented by the early modern witch hunters. Pearson noted that the Wicca provides a framework in which the image of oneself as a witch can be explored and brought into a modern context. It's very interesting that they talk about it being a kind of almost reactionary religion in some ways. When you study ancient texts, you actually can see the roots under which they are related to previous religions and reactions themselves to human culture. And that's one of the things I've always found interesting about religious studies. The most religious study, of course, that I've done is Christian religious study, just because of where I'm placed in society. But I'm really interested in doing more studies specifically in Buddhism and Islam, and maybe also Baha'i as well, because I had a really good Baha'i friend in high school. But in e.g. when you look and you compare, the Epic of Gilgamesh, and when you compare earlier writings and you compare the Old Testament, specifically Genesis, it seems to be a reactionary text in a way that, this seems to be a reactionary kind of view. I think if you've heard about it before, the 7-day creation story is meant to be a reaction to the creation stories that were commonplace of the time, of the gods fighting and stuff, and then slowly creating their land, whereas the Christian reactionary view is saying that monotheism is actually the way to go, and that one god actually created it with their unique power, and it wasn't an ancient historical battle. And I was reading the Quran, and I remember that there was a very specific relation that they had in their writings that was kind of a critique and a reaction to the Bible, but I forget what it was. But I'm actually really interested to get stuck into religious history a bit more on this channel, so please suggest it down below if you have anything I should read about. One of my personal beliefs is that you should read everything from both sides of every political tradition, and not regard the authorship necessarily, but regard the quality of the truth of the information. The Stoics said that you should be able to receive information from anyone, and evaluate its usefulness based on itself, not based on who wrote it, and that will give you a massive advantage over other people who blindly ignore, what a certain group has to say, because, it doesn't matter if you agree. Everyone has unique knowledge that can be shared and learnt from. Even if you severely disagree, there can be something you learn from them. And if you are waging a war against them, it's even more important to do this, because if there is an advantage you can gain from studying them, you can use it, of course, to defeat them physically, practically, tactically, strategically, and intellectually. So a lot of different religions and philosophies have that as a fundamental view. Of course, in the art of war, that's one of the fundamental things that you should study your enemy. Machiavelli is very strict about this, that you should know your enemy, and the ancient Stoic scholars said that you should not ignore any school of philosophy but study all of them. And it seems heretical to some of the ancient philosophies, but it's true. Anyway, it's a lot of rambling from me, but it is my passion to try and ignite people's fire, to study from people that they specifically would not otherwise have done. One of my favourite things to do is look at specific groups which I find that I have the most trouble dealing with. Like pseudoscientists, people that believe in anti-vaxxing and stuff like that. And then I force myself to read texts and stuff that they create to see if there's anything I can learn, or if I can understand them better. And sometimes it's painful, but it always yields interesting results. So I would urge you to do that if you can. Now let's move on. Pearson, Johan, the person that had that interesting quote from before, says, Pearson suggests that Wiccans identify with the witch because she is imagined as powerful. She can make people sleep for 100 years. She can see the future. She can curse and kill as well as heal. And of course she can turn people into frogs. Identifying as a witch also enables Wiccans to link themselves with those persecuted in the witch trials. The early modern people often referred to the Wiccans as the Burning Times. Various practitioners have made the historically inaccurate claim that 9 million people were executed as witches in the early modern period, thus drawing comparisons with the killing of 6 million Jews in the Holocaust, and presenting themselves as modern witches as persecuted minorities. Interesting. I think 9 million is a massive overstatement. I've never seen anything that indicates such large numbers. But then again, it's similar to the Spanish Inquisition a little bit. When you read about that, there are large claims of, hundreds of thousands, but when you actually look at the practical numbers, apparently, from what I've read, from most credible historians, there are about 12,000 people that died in the Inquisition, the burning and stuff like that. And so it wasn't like a mass slaughter. It was terrible, but it wasn't a mass slaughter. It was like, one person would be executed every week or every second week over a period of like 100 years or something like that. Yeah. Anyway, we go further. Their views on morality. We have a quote here by Lady Gwen Thompson. Abide the Wiccan laws ye must, in perfect love and perfect trust. Mind the threefold law ye should, 3 times bad and 3 times good. 8 words the Wiccan read fulfill, and it harm none, do what ye will. Interesting. I think I'd have to read that multiple times to deconstruct it and understand what they're talking about. Wicca has been characterized as a life-affirming religion. Practitioners typically present themselves as a positive force against the powers of destruction which threaten the world. It sounds a little bit like Baha'i, if you know the Baha'i religion. There exists no dogmatic moral or ethical code followed universally by Wiccans of all traditions. However, a majority follow a code known as the Wiccan Rede, which states, "And it harm none, do what ye will." Interesting. This is usually interpreted as a declaration of the freedom to act along with the necessity of taking responsibility for what follows from one's actions and minimizing harm to oneself and others. Interesting. It sounds a little bit whatever benevolent or malevolent actions a person performs will return to that person with triple force, or with equal force on each of the 3 levels of the body, mind, and spirit, similar to the Eastern idea of karma. The Wiccan Rede was most likely introduced into Wicca by Gerard Gardner and formalised publicly by Doreen Valiant, one of his high priestesses. The threefold law was an interpretation of Wiccan ideas and ritual made by Monique Wilson and further popularised by Raymond Buckland in his books on Wicca. Many Wiccans also seek to cultivate a set of 8 virtues mentioned in Doreen Valiant's Charge of the Goddess. These being mirth, reverence, honour, humility, strength, beauty, power, and compassion. In Valiant's poem, they are ordered in pairs of complementary opposites, reflecting a dualism that is common throughout Wiccan philosophy. Some lineaged Wiccans also observe a set of Wiccan laws commonly called the craft laws or ardanes, 30 of which exist in the Cartanian tradition and 161 of which are in the Alexandrian tradition. Valiant, one of Gardner's original high priestesses, argued that the first 30 of these rules are most likely invented by Gerald Gardner himself in mock archaic language as the byproduct of inner conflict within his bricked wood coven. The others were later additions made by Alexanders during the 1960s. Now, you can probably hear the crickets have started in the background, depending if my noise cancelling has put it out or not, but I hope you don't mind. In British traditional Wicca, sex complementarity is a basic and fundamental working principle, with men and women being seen as necessary presents to balance each other out. This may have derived from Gardner's interpretation of Murray's claim that the ancient witch cult was a fertility religion. Thus, many practitioners of British traditional Wicca have argued that gay men and women are not capable of correctly working magic without mind-sex pairings. Okay. Although Gerald Gardner initially demonstrated an aversion to homosexuality, claiming that it brought down the curse of the goddess, it is now generally accepted in all traditions of Wicca, with groups such as the Minoan Brotherhood openly basing their philosophy upon it, and various important figures in the craft such as Alexanders and Eddie Bukochny being openly homosexual or bisexual. It's interesting, as you can see, of course, that the religion is mainly reactionary, because it's something that people turn to as almost a rebellious act for either their parents or their society, and because it's, reactionary or rebellious, of course it will be progressive, because that is the definition of what progressive is. It's progressing away from what is normal. Progressive doesn't necessarily mean that it's left-wing. Progression can be right-wing if the dominant society is left. But it makes sense that this would slowly or quickly evolve to accept homosexuality and stuff like that, given that, of course, people that are homosexual would, of course, have a harder time finding their place in the church, and possibly, want to look for a reactionary religion to join. And so it makes sense that for this to find its niche and set within humanity, it needs to kind of evolve to fit. And since it looks like it doesn't have like a base, kind of like evidence base, but it's more of a spiritual revelation kind of thing, the fundamental beliefs can easily be changed, I think, because they're not set in stone. believed around this time he went and met these like people that were standing around this giant like cube or something, and got a revelation at this time, and therefore God said to do this and blah blah blah. Whereas I don't think there is a moment where the spirituality was revealed and they use it as like an evidence base for what they believe. Rather, it's kind of a little bit like a practice of like science, where it can evolve and change over time. Really interesting to be able to finally understand what they believe and where it comes from. Yeah. Anyway, moving on. Oh yeah, but I also think that Islam has a little bit more room to change than possibly maybe Christianity does, because Islam, one of the core things that they say there is that I think Muhammad said that you should be able to change the core of what you practice to be able to best suit the society that you're in. That's what I think a lot of Muslim individuals say in terms of like why the more violent things in Islam don't apply in modern society, because of course they're not how society operates now. And given, furthermore, hadiths can be written, and some hadiths are really highly regarded, and a lot of Muslims really heavily manipulate and practice what they believe based on the given hadiths that they believe. And if you don't know what a hadith is, it's like a little addition. It's like an extra book written by someone important in the Islamic tradition, which can be, for some, as important as the Quran. I know some groups find them more important, but I think the majority find them a little bit less important than the Quran, but still very important. Now, continuing on, the scholar of religion Johan Pearson noted that in her experience, most Wiccans take a realistic view of living in the real world, replete with its many problems, and do not claim that the gods have all the answers to these. She suggested that Wiccans do not claim to seek perfection, but instead wholeness or completeness, which includes an acceptance of traits like anger, weakness, and pain. She contrasted the Wiccan acceptance of an interplay between light and dark against the New Age focus on white light. Similarly, the scholar of religion Geoffrey Samuel noted that Wiccans devote a perhaps surprising amount of attention to darkness and death. Many Wiccans are involved in environmentalist campaigns. Interesting. Now they have the 5 elements, and they have a picture of a pentagram here, with, the star and the 5 elements, kind of like this: spirit, water, fire, earth, and air, and they're all interconnected. Now, many traditions hold a belief in the 5 classical elements, although they are seen as symbolic representations of the phases of matter. These 5 elements are invoked during many magical rituals, notably when consecrating a magic circle. The 5 elements are air, fire, water, earth, and ether, or spirit. Ether unites the other 4. Various analogies have been devised to explain the concept of the 5 elements. For instance, the Wiccan Anne-Marie Gallagher used that of a tree, which is composed of earth with the soil and plant matter, water being sap and moisture, fire through photosynthesis, and air, the creation of oxygen from carbon dioxide, all of which are believed to be united through spirit. Traditionally, in the Gardnerian craft, each element has been associated with a cardinal point of the compass: air with east, fire with south, water with west, earth with north, and spirit with the centre. However, some Wiccans, such as Frederick Lamont, have claimed that the set cardinal points are only those applicable to Ocean. East to their east. Interesting. Wow, I could see a very intense discussion going on here between traditional Wiccans and more modern Wiccans about that. Other craft groups have associated the elements with different cardinal points. For instance, Robert Cochrane's clan of Tubal-Cain associated earth with south, fire with east, water with west, and air with north, and each of which were controlled over by a different deity who was seen as children of the primary horned god and goddess. The 5 elements are symbolized by the 5 points of the pentagram, the most prominently used symbol of Wicca. And there you go. That's not the end of the Wikipedia. There will be a part 3. And I hope you can join me for it. Thank you so much for joining me for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. And I hope you like the opportunity to get back, stop, relax, hang out with me for a bit. As I definitely have enjoyed hanging out with you. Thank you so much.